following podcast has been edited for YouTube. Listen to the full podcast wherever you find podcasts.
Welcome back, explorers. I'm David, that's Wesley, and this is the Trailcast.
The weekly show where we talk about, well, we don't really know right now, but we'll let you know when we figure that out.
In the meantime, sit tight and listen up, because we're going to a galaxy far, far away.
That's right. Today we're going to be talking about Star Wars. So, David, when it comes to the Star Wars universe, where do you want to start? Because the Star Wars universe is so vast, has so much to it. It's been icon in pop culture for a long, long time, with many movies and TV shows and books and comics being written about it. So, where do you want to start with all this?
Well, I mean, honestly, with Star Wars universe, we could probably do an entire podcast series on Star Wars.
We could probably do an entire podcast.
That's what I mean. Like we could just do our.
Well, you added series to the end of it, and then I was like thinking that was where my But see, if you meant that, then we're on the same page.
Yeah.
But you just said it wrong. That's okay. It's okay to be wrong.
Sure.
You are wrong most of the time.
But I think for right now.
Wow.
I think for right now we should start. Let's just start with the current state of Star Wars. I know that's what a place to start, but let's just brush the question. What do you think of Star Wars at the moment?
Okay, so what? Let's see. The newest installment in Star Wars, or the most recent one, I guess, that I've seen, because the Bad Batch is the newest, right?
That's the most current thing.
Current. Before that was Kenobi, right?
I don't remember if it was Kenobi or Andor.
Oh yeah, I've started watching Andor. I have not finished that yet.
Mm-hmm.
See, okay, so the thing that I like about what it currently is going on in Star Wars is that they're starting to flesh out some areas that haven't really been, talked about a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they have been talked about, they're starting to canonize more because with the new sequels coming out, they said basically anything that's not movies is no longer canon.
They made everything they pretty much scrapped everything that wasn't the original 6 movies or the Clone Wars TV show.
Yeah. And with that being said, I liked that they're going in depth on some of these, maybe not necessarily how they're doing it in every aspect, but I like that they are doing it.
Which, on that note, I actually, you briefly mentioned Bad Batch a minute ago. I really love the Bad Batch because that point in Star Wars history, I guess. I really like that. Like that time between.
Yeah, two of my favorite times. Two the favorite times that I like, and I think most of it has to do with the fact that there's so little known about, not known, but so little, the movies never they never made movies about it, and until recently they never made shows. But the two areas would have been the Old Republic, and then the time in between Episode 3 and Episode 4.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, we have gotten a lot between in that time frame.
Mm-hmm.
You can go back to Force Unleashed.
Yeah.
Some of these games and stuff, and you got a lot of comics between those points. But
which have they is Force Unleashed, is that no longer canon, or do they keep that?
That's no longer canon.
Okay.
In the new canon, the closest thing would be they did kind of do some stuff in Rebels that kind of patterned some of the plot points in Force Unleashed, and Jedi Fallen Order. And that series is going to kind of take the role of the single-player Star Wars game between episodes 3 and 4. But one thing I do like about Bad Batch is it literally takes place right after episode 3.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't watched it in a minute, but the first episode takes place during Order 66, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it kind of overlaps with the 7th season of Clone Wars and Episode 3.
Yeah,
That
I do like how later on in like uh, it was a big reveal when it happened, but that because when Clone Wars stopped, everyone already knew what happened. So that was why they eventually made episode or the 7th season so that they can kind of tie off some loose ends and you can kind of figure out maybe where your favorite characters ended up. But in Rebels, they brought back the characters of Rex
Mhm.
and what was his name? Wolf.
Yeah.
And then the last, I forgot the last guy's name.
It's been a minute.
Yeah, but they brought back those characters, and one of my favorite characters from the Clone Wars is Captain Rex.
Mhm.
And you don't really know what happened with him, and since he wasn't in the movies like Commander Cody was, there was no like, oh, he turned on the Jedi or whatever. There's just nothing about it. And most people, I guess, probably just assumed that he was a part, of all that because there was no mention of him in Episode 3 or moving forward. But then they brought him back in that, and it's like, well, he's out there, but he's not one of them. And then they kind of go back into it a little bit more in the Clone Wars season 7, with kind of showing that he was somewhat a part of it, but because I know he did at first turn. There was something with that. It's been a while since I've seen season 7 too.
Yeah, in season 7, so he did like the inhibitor chip did work, and so he did turn, but yeah, that was a whole episode. I think it was the second to last episode in season 7 where Ahsoka was trying to get the inhibitor chip out.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay.
But talking about this, those last 4 episodes of season 7 of the Clone Wars is honestly probably the best Star Wars thing Disney has made. Like that.
I will say so the way the Clone Wars had to end, because it's the way that the original or the prequel trilogy ends, cannot end good. Like on a high for the heroes. But the way that they ended it was with the tragedies that happened. They did it in such a good way.
You look at some of the duels from the prequel era, which in my opinion are the best duels in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like Duel of the Fates in Episode 1, the Obi-Wan Anakin duel on Mustafar.
Now, on just a quick side note with that, you talk about how those are some of the best ones. You can't even get on the fact that it's because CGI is better, which it is better in the prequels than it is in the originals. But I would even take the prequel duels over the sequel ones, just because of the even the style of fighting that they did. I don't think they did it as well when they did the prequels. But the sequels. But continue with what you were saying.
Yeah, but of the that duel in Clone Wars, in season 7 of Clone Wars, is probably the most reminiscent of those prequel trilogy duels in Disney Star Wars.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it is also because it's also the same time frame, and there's a lot of stake, and you can kind of almost like that scene was also mocap. I don't know if you know this, but that scene.
I did see.
That scene was motion capture, so they actually had actors do all the choreography for it.
Yeah, I actually did see the. I don't usually dive a whole lot into it. When I was younger, I looked a lot into the behind the scenes stuff for a lot of Star Wars and Marvel and all. But I actually came across that just one day, saw it, and I was like, oh, this looks cool. And that's the only reason I know that. But it's cool that they did that, and that adds an element of realism to the duel that makes it that much better.
And then moving on to the second part of that story arc, once they actually capture Maul and they're on the Venator when Order 66 hits, that those last 2 episodes are honestly more emotional than anything in the sequel trilogy.
Mm-hmm. Because they really dive into the relationship that Ahsoka has with the clones,
Mm-hmm.
and how they're trying to kill her because this is how their brain has been wired. So
Mhm.
now they don't see her as a friend anymore. They don't care about all the memories or anything that they've been doing over the past couple of years. It's all just, we got to kill her, and she still sees them as friends, and she's having to defend herself and all that.
And that's actually one of the things with you mentioned Rex earlier with the inhibitor chip.
Mm-hmm.
Once he gets Order 66, and like you said, it's been a minute since you
Yeah.
watched that, but he literally when he pulls his gun on Ahsoka, but he's literally in tears.
Yeah.
Because he still has that.
It has been a minute, but that specific scene, you know how like they talk about like videos that live rent free in your head.
Yeah.
Like that's one of those. Like I definitely can see that in my head because.
But I mean, talking about the emotionalness of that story arc. I mean, again, partially of it, part of it is, for a lot of people our age, we grew up with these characters.
Yeah.
And then to see this, and you said you knew that Clone Wars was heading to this. You knew that was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But to actually see it, it's just
yeah. You talking about us growing up with this? Like my sisters have recently tried to get into more of the Star Wars, like aside from the movies, and obviously a big part of that is Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And you watch the Clone Wars, and watching back on them, the first season or two of it is really hard to watch because it was made as a kids show.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that's like you and me never had to deal with because we were kids when we watched it, so we enjoyed it like that. Even though going back now, some of the elements are like, oh wow, this would be hard to watch if I had to watch it all now.
I mean, even a lot of even a lot of the later seasons, a lot of the filler episodes are very same thing with a current season of Bad Batch. I don't know if it's all going to be out by the time this podcast goes up, but as of recording this, it's not all out yet. And in fact, I'm actually 2 episodes behind. But
how many episodes are out?
I think it's about 12.
Okay, well I'm about 12 episodes behind.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many there are, but there are a lot of filler episodes in it, and that's kind of annoying. But the most recent episodes that I watched were actually started getting into the actual story of the season because it's got an overarching story.
When it comes to it now, I do wonder why would they put in filler episodes at this point? You'd think that if they have a final goal with all this, and they're, every episode is supposed to lead towards that goal. Like, when they were making the Clone Wars, for all intents and purposes, I felt like they were just making a kid's TV show about Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
But now they're making them specifically to move the plots in Star Wars. Whether it's, filling in gaps, or it's, adding to the end arc of the story. So it's like, why do they need filler episodes at this point in time? I mean, obviously, it might make them more money. I don't really know how all that works for, how much they make off of each episode. So maybe they need so many episodes per season.
I would assume it's probably the they pretty much when the show gets greenlit, they get greenlit for a certain amount of episodes, and so they have to meet that quota, whether or not they have the overarching story to fill that time. But and also I feel like they're also trying to go with that same style of Clone Wars.
That's fair. Because I will say, it's a spin-off show of the Clone Wars.
Bad Batch is pretty much the 2 seasons of Bad Batch that are out now are pretty much Clone Wars seasons 8 and 9.
Yeah,
and you still have Rex in it, and from time to time Rex is in it. You have the main characters are clones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm assuming at some point they might bring Ahsoka into it.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on all the stuff they've done recently when they did it in Rogue One with Grand Moff Tarkin? They did it with Leia in that one too. And then they did it with Luke in The Mandalorian, where they de-age some other actor, put what's it called? It's the deep fake or whatever.
Yeah.
What was your opinion of that?
I know there's a lot of people who like hated it in The Mandalorian when Luke showed it, like hated the way he looked.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was amazing. Like I thought that was the coolest thing when that came out because, I mean, I know it doesn't look like the most real. I guess like you can.
Mm-hmm.
So at certain points with some of these, you can tell it's CGI.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, does it really matter?
What's your thoughts with? So they used specifically with Grand Moff Tarkin. The actor had obviously been dead, so they brought him back to life with this. I'm not sure about all the legal stuff that they have to go through with all that, but what's your opinion on that? Like bringing actors back to life, that because they can do this.
I think it depends on what exactly they do with the character. I mean, I thought for that it was they did it respectfully at least with Tarkin. And they did the same thing. It wasn't CGI, but they did something similar in Rise of Skywalker with Carrie Fisher because she'd passed away before that movie, and they just had footage of her from that they'd already filmed, and they used that. But again, I think it's done respectfully. I don't have a problem with it. But again, that's
more like in the lines of like, what do you think about the technology that they are able to do stuff like this?
Oh, that they're able to do it, that's really cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think it'll ever be abused?
Most likely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's just like, I've heard people talk about this before too. Like, The Simpsons has gone on for like 20 plus seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And they've already done this with a couple characters actually, who the voice actors passed away.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, they're not even going to need voice actors. They'll have enough of the dialogue from their, however many seasons that they can just make up whole new dialogue with this.
Yeah.
And there's even AI now that can perfectly match voices.
Yeah.
It's
I watch we've been watching a decent bit of Family Guy recently, and in that they'll bring in actors, for different jokes, and sometimes the actors don't sound don't sound exactly like they do in real life, but sometimes the actor sounds spot on, and for a fact while you're watching it that they probably didn't bring in the actual actor to make this joke about them, so they had to, have another voice actor, or possibly at some point later on maybe like use AI to get it to sound like that, And it's like, at what point, and that's the idea with the using the deep fakes, is like, at what point do you no longer need actors as long as you have their likeness, which, you...
Yeah, that's another thing. I feel like as this kind of technology evolves, we're probably going to start seeing more of a thing of your likeness being worth a lot more than your actual work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, as long as you get paid for what you look like, you don't have to do as much. So there's that.
So you could technically be an actor and have no talent at all.
Exactly.
Mandalorian Season 3 is coming out soon. So what are your thoughts on the first two seasons of The Mandalorian?
I thought they were both very good. I was disappointed when later on they came out with Boba Fett, because I can't really place my finger on specifically what it was, but I just didn't like Boba Fett.
Talking about the Book of Boba Fett?
The Book of Boba Fett. I did not like the series.
So,
and I haven't seen them. It's been a minute since I watched The Mandalorian, but I loved one thing I was going to mention about that is how, so throughout the first two seasons. It's not until the end of the second season, right, that he takes off his mask, right? It's not.
No, it's into the first season that he takes it off for the
okay.
Where you see his face for the first time.
Well, nonetheless, the amount of emotion he portrays and all through just what he says, and even in the monotone voice that he has with the mask on, like, he did a very good job of acting as the Mandalorian with having a mask on the whole entire time, and the majority of the time going to be having a mask on. Like, he did a phenomenal job with that.
Like he displays so much emotion just from his body language.
Yeah.
Like, because there's certain scenes like with him and Grogu in the cockpit of the what's the ship called?
I have no idea.
I can't remember. But anyway, I think it's the Razor Crest.
That sounds right.
There might be another ship in Star Wars, but that sounds right. Anyway, but him and Grogu in the cockpit of the ship when they're flying from whatever mission over. He can portray so much emotion without talking or any facial features, because just his body language, you know exactly what he's thinking.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, Wesley forgot what he was about to say.
No,
so
I
guess
didn't have
I'll just
anything to
keep
say.
going.
I just opened my mouth. I'm not gonna lie about that.
Well, so you mentioned the Book of Boba Fett, and I think one thing I didn't like about it is they made Boba Fett wasn't Boba Fett in that show. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, and I know a lot of people have joked about this, but it really was just Mandalorian season 2.5, because
Yeah.
I mean,
you know, it's also weird that, like, as far as canonized, we have very little. Like, I mean, and there's some in the Clone Wars and with like young Boba Fett and all. But like, as far as Boba Fett as a character, there's very little that we have canonized. But that doesn't stop any Star Wars fan from being able to define what kind of a character he is and be able to watch Boba Fett and be like, that's not who he's supposed to be. You know? Like, you know, we have like comic books and all that stuff about
well,
it.
and like going back to the original trilogy, Boba Fett had like 3 lines in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Or not Return of the Jedi, in Empire.
Attack of the Clones.
Empire.
Oh, you're talking about the original trilogy. My bad. Yeah.
Yeah, in the original trilogy, Boba Fett had like 3 lines in Empire, and then he literally dies within like the first 15 minutes of Jedi.
Yeah.
And you see his character, and it's just the mystery about the character. I think is why a lot of people like him so much.
Yeah.
And I think that's why.
Well, I think if you also did it like, if they did it in a similar way to the way that they had been doing The Mandalorian, I think that people would have liked the series better, because that's another thing about The Mandalorian. Like, in the Mandalorian series, there was a bunch of mystery about him because he carried himself very similarly to how you would expect Boba Fett to carry himself. Being a Mandalorian.
In Mandalorian season 2, in the Mandalorian season 2, I think Boba Fett in the Mandalorian season 2 was more Boba Fett like you said. But I think in one of the things in the Book of Boba Fett, for one thing, he had his helmet off way too much.
Yeah.
He talked too much.
Yep.
And didn't really do anything. Like,
exactly. And I understand that the actor's older. Like, you don't want to have as many action scenes. But if you had the helmet on more often,
you could use a stunt double.
You can use a stunt double, just as fine.
Yeah.
So, and I'm even fine with him going back and telling the story about how he got out of the what's that animal called?
Sarlacc pit.
The Sarlacc pit, and that he was, hanging out with the Tusken Raiders for all that time. Like, I'm fine with all that too. But present day needs to have, more of what Boba Fett actually is. You can even have him where he takes over and he's, ruling this area that was once Jabba the Hutt's. That's fine. I don't know, like, but Boba Fett was a bounty hunter. He wasn't like a, warlord or anything like that. Like, he didn't usually rule over people. But, like, I'm fine if you go that route. He's older now. He can settle down. But, yeah, like you're saying, like, he doesn't need to have, like, he needs to have more of that mystery about him with, like, you can't see his face. You don't know what he's thinking unless he says 1 or 2 little words here.
And talking about like Boba Fett in the original trilogy, like with the mystery about him, I think that's also one reason why everyone loves Boba Fett. But you almost never hear anyone talking about Jango Fett.
Yeah.
Because Jango Fett, they just talk too much about, like, he was too much of a character, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. As far as the route that the Book of Boba Fett took, and how Boba Fett was portrayed as, like, more or less like a kind character, you know, like he was looking out for people and stuff like that. How do you feel about that?
I understand what they were going for with the thing of, like, the near-death experience kind of changed his outlook on what I understand where they're coming from with that, but at the same time, honestly, like, you don't always just go from, like, just
Bad to good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think with that being part of it, that's another reason why looking at the Book of Boba Fett, it does not look like Boba Fett?
Because, I mean, and okay, I'll say Boba Fett, in my mind, like with being a bounty hunter stuff, is not necessarily a bad guy. Like Star Wars is very, like, the mainline Star Wars universe is very black and white when it comes to good guy, bad guy. You have the Jedi, who are the good guys, and the Sith, who are the bad guys. For the most part, we've all heard the theories about that Jedi are evil, whatever. But
you've been talking to Anakin too much.
But the way it is, the Jedi are good, Sith are bad. It's black and white.
Yeah.
But they're all, especially in the original trilogy, there's this also kind of like third category of like scum, pretty much.
Yeah.
That's Han Solo, for example. Yes, he started out scum. He was not real in A New Hope. He wasn't really good. He wasn't really bad.
He just does whatever pays the most.
Yeah, but by the end of Return of the Jedi, he actually cares about the cause.
Yeah.
He's actually.
They even start showing that some at the end of A New Hope too,
when
because he comes back,
Luke.
and it's like he had no reason to do that. Now, he kind of flip flops back and forth through, well, being that he's really not, at least on purpose, in a lot of The Empire Strikes Back, because they get stuck in Cloud City there, and that's when he gets put into the what's it called? Carbonite. For whatever, my mind was coming up with carbon frostbite, and I was like, that's not right. Anyways,
Carbon frostbite.
but he gets put in the carbonite there.
Put that on a T-shirt.
Yeah, there you go. It's like he comes back at the beginning or at the end of A New Hope, and then at the beginning of The Empire Strikes Back, he's trying to leave again. He's like, I'm done with this. I've been doing this for long enough, however long it's been. He's like, I'm good. I'm leaving now. Then he gets stuck in all this stuff. And all that stuff happens in the beginning of the Return of the Jedi, and then by the end of it all, he's genuinely trying to help. It's like, but it takes that movie and a half, kind of little bit of time to completely win him over.
Which I want to mention one more thing about Boba Fett, which is actually kind of where I was going with this, but we'll come back to Han, because I do want to talk about Han again. But, so talking about the thing with the scum, that's kind of what I interpreted Boba Fett as.
Yeah.
And I would put him in that same category. But the difference between, I'll compare him to Han, because we were already talking about Han. Han was, like, from the beginning, did lean more good. He was very anti-Empire, pretty much, like.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
if the Empire came to him and offered him money, he probably would say no. Or he would find a way out of it, more or less. Because he wouldn't want to get associated with the Empire, whereas Boba Fett obviously accepted whatever.
But Boba Fett was working for Vader in Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
Which, so Boba Fett, in my mind, is pretty much the definition of that scum category, because he fits that, like, only caring about himself.
Yeah.
Only in it for the money.
I don't like how they finished it.
Yeah.
Now, had the Book of Boba Fett had a better storyline to it, and had Boba Fett been more of what Boba Fett had been, I probably would have liked him killing at the end. Now, I will say there is a theory that Cad Bane's not dead from that, being that the species in which Cad Bane is, like, apparently he's a little bit more impervious to like a lot of the wounds that would come across like most people. But like, you know, looking back on like the Clone Wars and the little rivalry that started spewing between Cad Bane and Boba Fett, because you know Jango Fett had been the best bounty hunter around, and Cad Bane was like, no, I'm the best, but he never got a chance to prove it because Jango was killed. He didn't get to kill him, and then Boba Fett ends up kind of meshing into that role of his father, and then Cad Bane's like, well, now I got to show everyone that I am the best, and he tries to do that constantly, not being able to finish things with Boba Fett, and then he finally gets that final moment there with at the end of this, ends up getting beaten, but
So
I don't think that he should have gotten beaten if it was a real fight.
if I could be kind of hypothetical here, so I think the Book of Boba Fett could have been better if they had Cad Bane play a more of a role in it. So
Instead of coming in like in the last two.
imagine this. So, and they could even still do that arc of Boba Fett having kind of that. I almost said a redemption arc, but it's not really redemption because he was never good in the first place. But the coming to the light, that arc,
Yeah.
They could have done that, but I think it should have been more over the course of the season. So, picture this. So, and you could still even have the Pikes be the main villain.
Yeah.
But have
Pikes are the main villain of all of Star Wars, so
But have Cad Bane be like the face of the kind of the main antagonist, pretty much. And so Boba Fett and Cad Bane are kind of fighting throughout the season, and finally it comes to a head, and Boba kind of like you can kind of see the character development more so in that, and then that's actually like that final fight between Boba and Cad Bane kind of becomes the point when
the thing is
he turns good, but
is that I feel like they wanted that fight to mean a lot more than it did, but because they didn't have much build up in the Book of Boba Fett, and in all honesty, like even as a Star Wars fan, like I didn't see a whole lot to that. I had to look up like on YouTube like stuff like more about the rivalry that Cad Bane and Boba Fett had to know more about this, because even watching through the Clone Wars, it's kind of brushed over still. Like it's in a couple episodes here and there, but it's not like a main focal point. It's not a main plot point.
And if you had expanded upon that more in the Book of Boba Fett, that fight would have meant more, and then you could use that fight as the final, like start with the Sarlacc pit of the kind of the redeeming thing with Boba Fett, but then have that be the like end of it. Like so, going back to the comparison with Han's kind of character arc, it was the entire original trilogy.
Yeah.
Like he didn't just like as soon as he met Luke become good.
Well, like we were saying a minute ago, like the whole from end of A New Hope to the beginning of Return of the Jedi, he was having that whole entire transformation.
If they had done that same kind, like they had done an arc, a character arc with Boba, instead of having him like immediately want to turn over a new leaf with the after the Sarlacc pit and with the Sand People.
Yeah.
If they had done it where like it took the entire time up until that fight with Cad Bane.
Yeah.
I feel like that would have meant more, and that would have been a better storyline. What do you think of Solo?
Okay, so in my opinion, no one liked Solo. Like the reviews came out, everyone was like just crapping all over Solo, saying it was such a bad movie. I thought it was a really good movie. I understand that the lead actor who plays the character was not in it because they played a younger version of it. And I would not have liked it had they brought in a like if they did a deep fake for the whole movie. If they figured out a way to do that and like figure out a way to do it and it was cost effective, I still wouldn't have liked it because I don't think that would have turned out well. But I thought the movie was good. I understand how it felt a little detached from the Star Wars universe, but like I thought it was a good way to tell some of the early stuff for the life of Han.
So with Han, Solo as a standalone movie, to me, does not work. Because, or with the rest of Star Wars, it does not work. Because
there are some continuity errors that they have in it.
Not really that, but just talking about Han's character development. We mentioned his character development over the original trilogy.
You're saying he's not enough of a scumbag by the end of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
And that's fair.
I think that they were setting up a sequel,
Mm-hmm.
and then because Solo got such such a bad reputation or got such a bad review,
Yeah.
they canceled it. Which if they had stuck with their plan and had Han be
That's the thing. That's why Star Wars keeps failing. It's because they can't just stick with what they're doing. Darth Jar Jar would be a thing if they just stuck with what they were doing. That's a story for another day.
yeah, we'll talk about that later. But no, I think Han. So, in just a single movie could have worked. So, if they had if they had Han lose more to understand why he was a scumbag, and
Yeah.
I think if they'd had what's her name, the girl, I don't remember her name, but the Kira, I think it was Kira,
Sounds right.
the girl in Solo. If they'd had her die
Mm-hmm.
in it, that would have made more sense to where Han is.
Well, I will say. So you look at him.
Insane.
You look at him at the beginning of New Hope, right?
Mhm.
And he is very much in that scum category where he is
Mhm.
out for his best interest. At the beginning of, or throughout the Solo movie, he's from a planet where you have to be out for your best interest, otherwise you don't survive. Okay.
Mhm.
Now the reason that it might be a better route to go with her leaving and kind of stabbing him in the back is because, well, if you're out for your best interest means that you're not going to trust anyone, and some of the trust issues might come from the fact that he's been stabbed in the back before, and they showed it some in that movie.
True, but like I said, I think at the end of Solo, I still think he was too much of a good guy.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously you're going to get that. I think that I do agree with that. Like, not everything about Solo. I don't think it deserved the backlash that it got.
No, he didn't.
But I do agree that there were things in it that could have been better. And yes, I do think that he should have come out at the end being. You can still have him being a bad character, in a good way. Like you know what I mean.
You can have him still being the scumbag, but still making moral decisions.
Yeah. Now I will say I think they showed at the end of that they showed the card game in which he won the Millennium Falcon and I'm pretty sure he cheated in that, but I think they showed how he ended up cheating with that, but even that just a little brush away thing like that doesn't show that the character's a scumbag at the end of it.
Oh, I will say, talking about that, Donald Glover as Lando.
Yeah.
That casting is perfect for me.
Yeah, he did a good job with that.
You know what, talking about the casting in Solo, I actually don't have a problem with it because if you and I've seen people deep fake Harrison Ford onto what's his name, Alden Ehrenreich or something like that.
I don't know. Is that the actor who plays
Solo? The actor in Solo who played Han. I've seen him deep fake Harrison Ford onto it, and
I think
he
could have styled him better to look more like Harrison
But
Ford.
he looks a lot like a young Harrison Ford. He got the mannerisms really good. I don't really have a problem with that. I said the main problem I have with it is just the character development in Solo. But honestly, for most people, if you don't like Solo, honestly, if it were a movie completely detached from Star Wars, if it was not a Star Wars movie,
yeah,
most people would like it.
Yeah, so that's another thing. It's
because it's not an amazing movie, but it's not as bad of a movie as everyone says it is.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Is when it comes to big franchises like this, obviously they're gonna be graded at more recently with Marvel movies. People know the level of Marvel movies, the standard that they keep Marvel movies to. And so when a Marvel movie does not meet that standard, it's a really bad Marvel movie, even if it's a good movie by itself. You know. Now, in my opinion, I think Marvel's gotten a little lax with their content recently, just in an effort to put out more of it. But that's a discussion for another day. But when it comes to Star Wars, there's not necessarily a bar to meet as much, but there's certain aspects that you can't as much as I would be like, hey, don't grade it as a Star Wars movie, just grade it as a movie. You have to grade it as a Star Wars movie because that's what it is.
Because okay, well, yes, you can look at a movie objectively without comparing what it's connected to.
Mm-hmm.
You also do have to consider the universe itself, because
Yeah.
and that's another thing. Like
That's not what I'm getting at.
with a Star Wars movie, when you go to the theater and watch a Star Wars movie,
Mhm.
you have an expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Is this going to feel like a Star Wars movie?
Yeah. And I will say that, like, there are aspects of it that, like, you know, I knew it was a Star Wars movie, but not everything about it felt Star Wars.
Yeah. And I mean, on one hand, that's gonna happen with some of the stuff, like the there's no epic lightsaber duels or anything.
Yeah.
But Rogue One didn't have that either, and I think Rogue One
did a
did
really well
get
job.
that Star Wars of the Disney Star Wars movies.
Mm-hmm. Rogue
One's the best.
Yeah.
Like that's like honestly.
They've only done the sequels, Rogue One and Solo, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So Rogue One, I think for most people, is in most people's like top 5
Mhm.
Star Wars movies.
I think what Rogue One really had going for it was it had the special effects that you get from the newer movies, being that it's a
Mhm.
newer movie, and it had some of the great storytelling aspects that you got from the original series.
Mhm.
You know.
Because it was so closely connected to A New Hope.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah, and even with that, like, it brought a new story in. It didn't just copy and paste with new characters, which is
Mhm.
what I really see out of the new trilogy.
Well, Explorers, that's all the time we have for today.
We hope you enjoyed this week's show.
For our YouTube audience, if you want to let us know what you thought, comment down below. Those of you listening elsewhere, you can DM us on Instagram and with any suggestions or your thoughts on the show.
And please join us next week as we go. Well, no,
On the Trailcast.
on the Trailcast. Getting our channels mixed up here.
Yeah, I mean, we'll figure it out.
We'll figure out eventually. All right.
See y'all later.